Anyway, this is to discuss the readings for Thanksgiving week, 11:19 and 11:21. They are dealing with race and specifically also blackness. And the first one was by Stuart Hall, the gentleman who spoke to you in that video that we saw, the very first one that we saw. And then there's the fact that he's talking about ideology. You need to look at the fact that he's looking at ideology in much the same way he discussed culture. And you also need to consider how he talks about the way producers of media, and I don't mean just film producers and TV producers, but the people who create media, in a sense, are part of a culture. So this whole idea of the conspiracy of trying to impose a way of view, a way of seeing on the mass public, is not completely correct according to him, which is something that we've talked about before. Because in the long run, the people who are producing what we see and who make what we see and write it are also part of that culture. So that's how mainstream ideas, if you will, or hegemonic ideas, get circulated and get reinforced. There's also the way that race is discussed about it, and what he talks about, the very ancient dialogues, ancient vocabulary. And how we, again, what I've said in class a million times, we know these stereotypes, we know what they're based on, and even though there might be overt or inferential racism, pay attention to that, in the long run, when we see something that infers, we know what it's inferring to, what it's referring to, what it's indicating, and what it's based on, even if it's just a very mild stereotype. Look at how the stereotypes pretty much for all the cultures, especially when they're about women, for all the non-mainstream, non-English American cultures, British American cultures, are very much the same in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to women. There's one type of woman and there's the other type of woman. What types are they? And how do they actually resemble the types for the very mainstream, very white British American woman? The next reading was what about the sitcoms? And this is important because it's from a study with Black American audience members talking about different TV shows and how they see those representations and how those representations in the mass media reflect their black reality in the U.S. Of course, there isn't a black reality, but there are certain cultural traits within the Black American community that definitely are mainstream within that community, if you will. So that's what you need to look at. Then the Angela Davis article about the black rapist myth. And again, look at how that she incorporates a history of the persecution and of black men as sexual beasts, and of the abuse of black women as simply creatures who lust after sex, and how even in the anti-rapist movement, how that anti-rape movement, which was mostly white middle class and upper class women who were writing these books and promoting this, just as the women's movement was, for the most part, at the very beginning, very white, very upper class. How black women how black women wove their experience into all of this, and how black women, in a sense, were at the forefront of this sort of thing. But again, they get pushed aside, as always. Sadly, they get pushed aside. Then finally, the Zora Neale Hurston readings. Very brief, very much from a personal standpoint. These are academic, even though they are very personal, because she was an anthropologist, someone who looked at culture. And in a very real sense, what she did was turn her anthropological eye on her own reality and open it up for analysis in very beautiful narrative prose. My what was it? My worst Jim Crow experience, my most humiliating Jim Crow experience, is an amazing article. How it feels to be the colored me, talking about, in a sense, how she is exceptional. But you get this feeling that even though this woman, who was an exception because she grew up in a black town in Florida, where being black was the standard, and she has never felt, as she says, to be pitied because of her blackness. She's never felt that her blackness is a weight. She's still also very aware, once she goes out into the mainstream culture, U.S. culture, that it's marked as different and as lesser than. And then, so look at all of those, the three articles, and just think about how she's talking about being black, knowing now that you know that she came from a place where being black was the standard, and then how that impacts her life in the outside world, if you will, in the white world. Anyway,